Good morning, Facebook. Good morning. Kandice here. I'm going to give it a second to allow some people to come in. Please excuse my tardiness this morning. I have had the most technical difficulties logging in. I'm still kind of figuring out which electronic tool is the best to use to log into our platform. So just bear with me for a second with that. It took a while to get in here, but anyway, I'm in here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kandice James. I'm one of the co-founders of Rooted Ambition Coaching and Development, as well as a life coach here with Rooted Ambition. So I want to give a little bit of a background before I jump into today's content. Kind of my area of specialty, or my area of focus, tends to lie in a relationship focus, whether it's premarital or marital, and as well as emotional wellness. One of my favorite topics to talk about, to share about, to help others grow in. And so today I'm actually going to start part of a series with you guys talking about emotional intelligence, but more so in a sense of life application of it. I know some people are familiar with the term emotional intelligence, and some people have never heard it before. Those of us who have heard about emotional intelligence, oftentimes you heard about it in a school setting, like college class or something like that. And the information's great and all that, but I really believe in being able to connect the dots, to put what we're learning that is such a powerful tool and apply it into our day-to-day. So I'm going to take you on a journey this morning. I hope that you're buckled up and ready. This is applicable for men and women. I don't want my brothers out there to see emotional wellness and go, oh, I don't need to see this. This is for you as well. Emotional intelligence is a tool that can help you in pretty much any situation to become resilient and to thrive. It's something that's so overlooked by us because we tend to, as a society, think emotions aren't important, but they are. So we're going to dive into this, and I'm going to try to take my time through the series because there's so much rich information, and I want to make sure that I share it with you guys properly. So I'm going to start out by first defining what emotional intelligence is. And this definition I got from Harvard's website, which I really love the way that they put this together because I think it makes it simplistic to understand, or simple to understand. So emotional intelligence refers to the ability to identify and regulate our emotions, and to recognize the emotions of other people and feel empathy towards them, and to use these abilities to communicate effectively and build healthy, productive relationships with others. That's a kind of a mouthful, but I love this because it really does break down what emotional intelligence does. Right now, we're kind of in this being like quarantine and being away from each other. We're kind of in this like, it's all about me, forget this person, everybody's disposable, we don't care. And so what we're seeing in our society is the effects of a decline in emotional intelligence, or a lack thereof. And so my goal and my hope with this is that it's not only life-changing for you on a personal level, but also on a legacy level, impact and how you interact with others. So I want to start, like I said, those of you who know me know I tell my business. Like if I go through an experience that was life-changing for me, I have no problem sharing it, even if it's a little bit embarrassing. And so I'm going to take you on this little journey with my story, because I think it's really life-changing, and it'll show the life application of emotional intelligence. So a while back, I had a conversation with an individual, and we were talking about working on something together. And which I had kind of suggested the idea lightheartedly, and the response was rejection. It was kind of like, nah, you're not reliable. And it was interesting because for me, on a personal level, my integrity is huge for me. Like when I say I'm going to show up for somebody, I'm showing up, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. Like you have to know, if I don't show up, it's because I'm damn near dead. Like I take my word very important, and I try to honor my word because I think that's a very important thing to do. So when this individual said that to me, I was like, what? I have always showed up, you know what I mean? And been 110%. So how is that your response? But whatever. And I wasn't even really serious in the moment, but it still impacted me. So I get home, and y'all, I am like stewing over this the whole day. I'm just walking through my house, and in my head, you have them go off sessions in your head. So I'm like in my head just going off like, how you gonna say this to me? And I'm recounting all the ways that I've showed up, and how like in my head just kind of proving how that person was wrong. So like it was the whole day, you know, and don't get it twisted. Just because this is what we do for a living doesn't mean we don't have to walk this out every day. So I'm just going through this in my head, just stewing like, I can't believe that they would disrespect me like that, blah, blah, blah. So as the day goes on, I get madder and madder. And mind you, this is an entire day over a small conversation that was really pretty irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. So the next morning I get up and I'm still pissed off, y'all. I'm like, still like, I cannot believe, you know, I'm just going off in my head. And then my focus starts to kind of shift from, okay, that pissed me off, to why did it make you that mad? Why are you so upset? Like I literally had a whole day go by where it took all the rental space in my head. It took time away from me being present with my family and present with the things that I want to do with my business and, you know, developing and all these other things that I could have really had some fruitful time in, because I was mad. So I'm like, why was I so upset about that? So as I start digging into that, I spent a whole half of another day really trying to analyze and get to the root of this thing, this thorn, that why was this bothering me, this conversation? So as I kind of had some quiet time to myself and was inside my head and stuff, I come to realize it's because it hurt me. And it hurt me because it affirmed a belief I had that this particular person thought about me. And it sent me in, it was triggering. And I was so upset because I was hurt. So here's the cycle of emotion. Initially, my initial reaction was anger, which is usually a secondary emotion. We know that. Then when I get to the root of it, I'm like, oh, okay, so this is really hurt. So you would think the next step is like, okay, I'm going to go into my little healing and my woosah. Nah, I went right back into anger, because then I was like, how you going to let her hurt you? You know, and just go into this whole thing. Again, where the, you know, my ego starts to kind of get in there, and I'm like, how you going, you know, you've done this and you've accomplished this, and going into just this still unhealthy, nasty, angry thought process. So I was upset that I was hurt by it. But the truth of that emotion was I really was hurt. No matter how much I want to try to hide and act like I'm stone faced and ended up nothing fazed me, it hurt me. So after I get through the initial shock of being hurt and going through that emotion, I said to myself in my quiet time, because I do spend time like meditating and sitting with those emotions, let's get to the bottom of this. I don't want this to drag out for months and a week and I'm mad and now we salty, and I don't want to do that. That it takes too much weight and it's too heavy to carry that. So I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do with this now? I know I'm hurt. Okay. So I know myself and I know how I process emotion. One of the things about me, who people who are close to me know, is I'm a crier. So I'm that person who cries at Disney movies. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm mad. I cry when I'm sad. I've been teased about it my entire life. My family will attest to this. I'm a total waterhead. And I get it honest because my mom is too. But I cry usually. And I was so self-conscious about that, because growing up, you know, especially culturally, we're taught, you know, you don't show no weakness. You know, you need to be strong. And tears are often viewed as a sign of weakness. But as I got to know myself and really grow and stuff like that, I realized that I may cry, but I ain't no punk. Like I have stood through some of the hardest things that people who don't shed tears couldn't make it through. And so I understood that that wasn't necessarily a translation of, because I cry, I'm weak. I understand that about myself, but I also understand that that is a cathartic release for me. I have to, in some situations, just let it come out in tears, because I can't hold that emotion. So later on that night, I go in the shower, you know, I didn't even talk to my husband about it, because I didn't want him to know. I was, you know, there's an embarrassment of like, dang, I let somebody hurt me. And it's something that seems so minute and stuff. So I go in the shower and I had me a good cry, y'all, like snot bubble tears. It was really good. I had a really good cry. I get out of the shower. Oh, let me back up. So while I'm going through this first episode of crying, my mind is just going in on me. Like, you are so weak. How are you going to cry about this? You're a grown woman, that you do wellness work. How are you going to let this affect you? So ego is trying to really feed into the negative of this. And because I'm hearing these things while I'm crying in my head, I had the opportunity to slip into shame. So I was ashamed that I felt this way. I was ashamed that I hurt, that it was hurting me. But then I started to realize that shame only exists in a bed of lies, because shame is what tells you you are a bad person. And frankly, I'm not a bad person because I was hurt. When you go through something in your life and something happens, to you, that doesn't make you a bad person because you were hurt. Someone cheats on you, that's not, you're not a bad person, but why do we experience shame in that? I've experienced multiple miscarriages. Immediately, the emotions that I have to, deal with are shame. But why? I'm not a bad person or a bad mother or a bad woman because I miscarried a child. That's not what that means. So shame is often embedded in a whole heap of lies. So when you start to feel that, identify it's not truth. The truth is I'm just hurt, and this is how I'm releasing it. So after I get out of the shower, I go in my bed and my husband's asleep, my kids are asleep and stuff like that. This is day 2 that I've invested into this whole thing. I lay down and it still was there. So I kept crying and I just let it out and let it out. And I cried for probably about an hour or so. And then after I did, I slept like a baby. I got up the next morning and I felt a weight lifted off of me. And I'm not saying crying is the end all be all, and that's the answer for everything. It just worked for me. That was how I was able to release that emotion. And because I processed it and understood it, I sat with it, I understood myself, and I went through that process, I was able to still interact with that individual, still go around that person. I still have a relationship with them, but I understood, I took some takeaways from that and learned from it. One of the takeaways I learned, my husband and I watch a lot of MMA and boxing. And one of the biggest takeaways I got from that was knowing your distance. And if you watch any type of contact sport, you know this. One of the biggest advantages, oftentimes they'll talk about reach advantage. So that's your ability to actually strike your opponent without getting struck back. And a lot of times in our relationships with people and our interactions with people, we need to know that, because some people, you get too close, they will strike you. And it's not necessarily intentional. Sometimes it's accidental. I'm sure that individual didn't even mean to do that. But we still need to understand what our distance is with different relationships. So that was a great takeaway for me. But also that because I went through the steps of emotional intelligence, I was able to thrive in managing that relationship and still taking care of myself, which that's what we need to do in situations, is take care of ourselves with that so we're not carrying these weights. So I shared this story because I'm actually going to break down different components of it. With emotional wellness or intelligence, there's 4 key elements. It's self-awareness. It's self-regulation. I'm sorry, I'm reading off my notes. So if you see me looking back and forth, that's what I'm doing. Social awareness, and then conflict management skills, which we saw that in all the steps of my story. So we saw the self-awareness, me understanding that, okay, I'm off, I'm upset, something's going on. Understanding how I process emotion is the self-regulation. This is what I'm feeling and what I'm going to do with it. The social awareness, what role I played in that conversation in the others. Instead of me going out and trying to hurt or get my get back, I understood that, okay, maybe this is coming. My brain is telling me the story it wants to hear. I don't know what the intention was behind that comment necessarily. And then the conflict management. It wasn't a thing where you don't have to confront everybody that hurts you. I didn't have to confront that situation. I just had to shift and understand how I'm supposed to respond to it. So we saw those different components. But diving deeper into it, this week I really want to focus on self-awareness. It is, to me, in chronological order of how we should process emotional intelligence. The first thing is understanding yourself. So a lot of times when you hear about war stories or combat stories, they say, know your enemy. And sometimes, you guys, we can be our greatest enemies because we overlook our needs. We overlook our accountability, our responsibility in the process. We overlook so many different things that have to do with us that are in our control, because it's so much easier at times to just address the outside stimuli or the outside variant versus really processing internally before we do that. So self-awareness is the ability to see yourself clearly and objectively through reflection and introspection. So remember how I talked about in the beginning where I said, why does that bother me? Okay, that's introspection. That's really looking deep inside, like, okay, well, let's have a conversation with Kandice. Why are you so triggered by that? Why does that bother you so bad? And then reflection, that part is kind of the component of me being able to identify that, okay, over the years, I have told myself this narrative about what I thought this particular person may have thought about me. And this is based on little things that I've observed. But reflecting on that, I'm like, okay, so I took that as solid word, even though it was never really proven to me in that sense, and I ran with it. So being able to objectively look at that and go, okay, even though this doesn't really align with what I feel right now, the truth of the matter is you kind of took some preconceived notions and ran with it. And that's kind of why you're in the state or the space that you're in emotionally. So self-awareness, again, is the ability to see yourself clearly and objectively through reflection and introspection. being able to identify your accountability in the situation. So reflection, we often get that opportunity by using external elements to gain perspective of ourselves. One of the things that I love, and if I've done this a lot in my corporate jobs, is I like feedback. My only thing is it can be done respectfully. You don't have to try to embarrass me or humiliate me, but I thrive off feedback. Tell me where I need to grow. I don't want to hear you're great, you're great, you're great. When we have our meetings with our staff here at Rooted Ambition, we challenge each other. And there's been times where my partners have called me out like, hey, that's a growth area for you. And here's what I'm going to challenge you to, and I'm going to hold you accountable to it. And I love that because since we've been working together, even behind the scenes, it's caused me to grow. It's caused me to really identify some of the things that I can't see myself. It's almost like in life we use mirrors. Mirrors reflect to us what is in front of us. And no matter how much I may want, to look in the mirror and see my hair waist length, if I'm not doing the work to grow my hair out, it's going to reflect what is actually reality. And so external elements tend to be really good resources for reflection. The only thing I would caution in that is to make sure that you're using trusting sources. You don't want a yes man. You don't want somebody that's going to be like, oh, you're great, you're great, you're great all the time. You need somebody that, or the external elements that's going to be able to say, hey, you're tripping, or you need to reflect on this. This was an ugly moment for you, or this is an accountability moment or a growth moment. Have those people in place, because you don't need someone who's just going to tell you you're great all the time. That is not a true reflection. That's just gassing your head up, which is not profitable. Introspection happens by looking inward based on your own intimate knowledge of yourself and gaining deeper perspective. So that's being honest with yourself. And sometimes those moments are not as easy, because being honest with yourself, you better than anybody does. So I remember there was a point in time where I had battled with jealousy because I was trying to get pregnant. It was like 5 years. I was going through all this stuff, and it was like everyone around me was just popping up pregnant. And some of my closest friends did. And it was hard because I wanted to be happy for them, and I was happy for them. But I also, introspection, I was feeling a way about it. I'm like, why is this not happening for me? And that's an uncomfortable truth to sit with and ask yourself about. So I did have moments where, I had to go through that process. And what I'm going to tell you is, when you're going through introspection, it is not a comfort zone. It's not a place where you're going to have fluffy blankets and pillows and nice warm coffee. You're going to have some truthful moments with yourself that don't feel too good. But it will lead to a more resilient and thriving you. So I encourage you, sit with those uncomfortable emotions. Don't shy away from that. So now I'm just going to talk about the life application, and then we'll wrap up here. So in order to be truly self-aware, we must be able to examine ourselves in truth and not judgment. Remember when I was talking about in my story how I was hurt, and immediately my head started going into all these different, how you going to that hurt you, and you're supposed to be this. And we often judge our emotions. I cannot tell you how many times I've had conversations with people who will tell me, well, this makes me feel this way. And then they'll go back and go, yeah, but I know this, and and they kind of justify, or they'll criticize the emotion or downplay it, instead of just saying, hey, this is what I feel. Because we're so conditioned to try to hurry up and judge it before somebody else does. And so what I would challenge you in is, as you go through the self-awareness process, don't judge the emotion, just identify it. Just give yourself the grace to just identify, this is what I'm feeling right now. And you don't have to explain it. You don't have to justify it. When I first had that incident, what I felt was anger. That's it. And I wasn't justifying that, not in the right way at least, but I wasn't going to judge it, because that's what I thought. I was mad. And I think sometimes some emotions we have, it's easier for us not to judge, but other emotions, we are very hard on ourselves. So just go through the motion and try to identify it without judging it. And again, oftentimes you will feel judgment and shame, but just try to make sure that you're paying attention to those notes, because that can get you off the track of self-awareness. Another note here is to be patient through processing the emotions. So I had a conversation with somebody recently where I talked about this, and the example I gave, that took about 48 hours for me to process through that emotion. But we're talking about someone said something in a casual conversation that I really wasn't taking serious anyway, and it annoyed me. That's a little bit more minor. We may have more serious things that we're going through that's going to take time. I had a situation with somebody that hurt me very deeply, and the dynamics of my relationship has changed drastically with this individual. there was a point in time where I was like, don't even say this person's name around me. And I mean, I was just furious. Years later, 3 years later, now I'm at a place where I'm like, oh, I genuinely wish well. I can hear stories. I can talk about this individual, and it doesn't bother me in any sense. I'm comfortable with where things are at. I'm in a good place. I'm not triggered by it, but it took time. So some things that hurt us more deeply, and not just pain, some things that affect us emotionally more deeply may take longer to process through that emotion. Be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. And through that process, yes, it doesn't feel good. There were days where it was very difficult for me and I didn't like it. And I was like, I just want to be over this. I don't want to feel this anymore. But I had to go through the process. So we can't rush our way through the emotional intelligence process. We have to take the time that is required. It's kind of like illness. Some things you can, kick. I know that there's some people who have been able to get through COVID, for example, and it took them maybe like 5 days. Then there's people who, they're 2 years in and they're still dealing with the effects of it. So it just kind of, really depends on, the type of illness and how our responses are and how, prepared we are for it, physically and emotionally and mentally and stuff like that. So give yourself grace, be patient through the process. Also remember that emotional intelligence, especially with self-awareness, this is going to be a multi-step process. Remember how I talked about in the story that I started out with anger, identified there was anger, then I was like, why? And then I figured out why. Then I went back to anger. Then I went back to, okay, how am I going to cope with this? Then I went through the coping. Then I went through the judgment. There's multiple steps with it. And again, that kind of goes back to my last point about being patient. Understanding that there's no perfect way to walk. It's not like a 1, 2, 3, 4, this is going to make you feel better. It doesn't work that way. We have to really nurture ourselves through that emotion. This is definitely a way to express self-love and self-care to yourself, is being patient with yourself while you're going through this, holding your own hand in a sense, and going through the process. And then also determining how to care for yourself. What's the remedy? This is really important because, and I want to spend a little bit of time here because I think that, especially with the influence of social media and the world around us and who we're all trying to be, highly successful, and we're, ambitious, and we're going out and doing these different things and marketing ourselves in these ways and all these different things that we're investing in for the purpose of our financial growth or career growth and stuff like that. And I think it's very easy for us to lose ourselves in that. Self-awareness is huge because it's a part of your journey to get to know yourself. I think that's something that will happen over and over again. There's not going to come a day that you're going to get to know yourself and that's just who you are, unless you plan on never growing and never evolving, which human nature is we're going to evolve. Whether you read books or not, or, invest in your growth and development or not, you are still going to age. You're still going to, your organs are going to get older. There's still things that are going to change. So we still have to get to know ourselves on a regular basis. We have to spend time with ourselves and understand, okay, how do I process emotion? Do I allow myself to feel anything other than anger? Do I give myself permission to cry when I need to? And that is specifically to my brothers out there, because I know that there's not often a lot of safe spaces for you to do that. And so if you are the type of man who that is your outlet, where is your safe space? Being able to identify that. How do you manage when you feel like you don't have that space? Giving that type of awareness. Maybe it's working out. I know my husband, he's a boxing fanatic. And so one of the things that he likes to do when he's challenged with some emotions is he goes in his gym and, he beats the crap out of his bag, and that helps him a little bit. Sometimes it's taking a walk. It might be writing. It might be cooking. It might be like, you know what, let me get in the kitchen. Let me focus on my art and being able to have that release. Sometimes it's cleaning. For me, sometimes I'm like, I get mad and I clean like a mad person. And then when I finish, I'm like, oh, I feel better. Got all that aggression out by that elbow grease scrubbing. So just really take the time to get to know yourself. Understand how you process emotion. What's your release? What is that? And what does that look like for you? This made me think about, too, the Runaway Bride, where Richard Gere told Julia Roberts, you don't even know how you like your eggs. And she had to go through that process of like, do I like them scrambled? Do I like them over easy? Because she would change depending on what person she was with and how they ate their eggs. So I would encourage you, if this is a step where you're like, I really don't know how I process emotion, or I don't really know who I am in that, to start that journey. And if you need some assistance with that, here's my little plug. Please reach out to us, because we are really committed to helping our community grow. And I would love to sit and kind of give some direction and some ideas on how to really start the process of finding yourself. And then also, so I kind of jumped into my last point, which is how do you process emotion? So I want to say this, and this was something I recently talked to somebody about. If you are easily triggered by something, like I told you before, there was a time where I had a conflict with an individual, and just saying that person's name in front of me pissed me off. Like, I would go off. And people around me knew, like, don't say it, because she's going to go into a whole go off. Then you haven't worked through the emotion. Then you're still sitting with that. And those sitting with it, with emotions is almost the negative emotions like that, or things that you haven't worked through, situations you haven't worked through, pains, disappointments, those type of things. It's like the equivalent of eating Burger King every single day, but never using the bathroom. That's what you're doing. And there's so many people that are so emotionally backed up and emotionally boggled down that it is manifesting illness in their body, literally. So if you find that you're like, I'm really bothered by this situation, and I notice that I'm not sleeping, I notice that I'm carrying a bunch of tension in my neck, or, you know, I'm starting to get sick more often, because it will affect your immune system. If you start noticing that, that's the manifestation that you have an emotional backup. And we need to work through that. And you can do it. Yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's just like when my son was sick recently, and he hates throwing up. Like, he just terrified. And I was like that my whole life too, until I started having babies. And then I got used to it, because, you know, that's the first trimester. But he was really terrified of that. And I remember sitting down talking to him, and I was like, yeah, it's going to suck, babe. Like, I totally get what you feel. I don't like it. I hate the way it feels. I hate that it feeling right before, and just, everything about it. It's going to suck. But once you get it out, you're going to feel a little bit better. And it may take a couple times to get it all the way out, but it'll make you feel better. It's the same thing with emotions. So if you're like, I don't really express emotions, I don't really deal with emotions, I'm not an emotional person, you might want to identify if you're emotionally backed up, because it will manifest in other areas of your life. So I've gone over my time today, but there's a lot. This is a very loaded series, and I hope that you'll get a chance to go hop over onto our YouTube page and subscribe there. These videos will be posted on our YouTube page, as well as our social media pages. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and then again, YouTube. But we're going to be going through a series about emotional intelligence and emotional wellness, but specifically the life application of it. If you have questions about how this applies in your life, or you identify kind of where you're stuck in this process, please drop it in the comments or inbox us. I would love to hit your points, or even have a discussion about it in one of our next lives, because, hey, we're all in this together. Here at Rooted Ambition, here we grow. And that's what I want to challenge you with today. I'm also going to post some links in the comments. If you are curious to learn more about yourself with emotional intelligence, I have a link where you can take a free EQ test, which is an emotional intelligence test, and it'll kind of tell you where you stand based on how you currently view how you process emotion. It's a short test. I think it was about 10 questions or so, but it really gives you a good snapshot about how you line up. What I will say is, if you do take the test and you notice that your emotional intelligence, or EQ, is very low, be encouraged, because this means the series is for you, and it's going to help so that you can build. So I want to share that with you, and I'm also going to share the links to the Harvard website, where I got some information on emotional wellness. And as we go through this series, I'm going to share some TED Talks that were very helpful that also talk about emotional wellness. I hope that this is life-changing for you, because it certainly has been for me. So let's go on this journey together. I'll see you guys soon.